Picture this. It's 2 a.m. The house is completely silent, your bedroom is perfectly dark, and yet your mind is running an absolute marathon. You know the feeling, right? You're lying there, wide awake, randomly replaying a mildly awkward conversation from 3 years ago, mentally drafting tomorrow's emails, and desperately calculating exactly how few hours of sleep you're going to get if you manage to fall asleep right this very second. Well, welcome to this explainer. It is a universal, incredibly frustrating modern experience. But today we're doing a deep dive into the fascinating science of micro-mental health and sleep optimization to figure out exactly why this happens. We're going to decode the underlying biological mechanisms of the midnight racing mind, and more importantly, uncover the clinical, evidence-based protocols you can use to finally quiet it down. So, here is the ultimate modern lifestyle contradiction. You are absolutely exhausted all day long, but the very second your head hits that pillow, you are suddenly wired. Why does anxiety spike specifically when the lights go out? Well, the answer actually lies in how our brain's attention networks operate. See, during the day, your brain is totally occupied with outward processing. Your deep work, screens, conversations. But when those daytime distractions fade away in the quiet of your bedroom, your brain violently shifts into inward processing. Without all that external stimuli, your unresolved thoughts and worries just take center stage. And for a lot of us, this triggers a massive state of physiological hyperarousal. Your heart rate elevates, your muscle tension increases, your breathing gets shallow. Your body literally reacts as if there is a physical predator in the room, all because of a mental loop. Okay, let's dive into a core concept that completely changes how we have to look at this problem. It's called bidirectionality. Now, this is the foundational science of our entire explainer today. We really can't look at mental health and sleep in isolation anymore because every system in your body influences every other system. Your micro-mental health affects your sleep, and your sleep dictates your brain health. It's a continuous biological loop. Anxiety disrupts your sleep architecture through that hyperarousal we just talked about, and then the resulting sleep deprivation severely amplifies your emotional vulnerability the next day, which, you guessed it, creates even more anxiety. It's a vicious, self-sustaining cycle, but understanding that this is a two-way street is absolutely crucial. It's the very first step to breaking the loop. Now, to put this into perspective, look at this incredibly fascinating number, 1.89. For the longest time, the scientific community just assumed that anxiety was the primary driver of poor sleep, like you're anxious, so you can't sleep. But landmark, large-scale cohort data has actually flipped that script entirely. While anxiety absolutely predicts sleep issues, having a baseline sleep disturbance is actually a much stronger predictor of developing an anxiety disorder later on. In fact, if you suffer from baseline sleep disturbances, your risk of developing anxiety increases by a massive factor of 1.89. Almost double. So this proves that sleep isn't just some passive pillar of health. Chronic poor sleep is an active mechanism that aggressively degrades your cognitive resilience. To really wrap our heads around why that happens, we just have to look inside the brain itself. Think of a healthy, rested brain. In that state, your prefrontal cortex, which is your logical, highly evolved executive control center, maintains top-down control over your emotions. It basically acts like a neurological brake system, keeping your amygdala, which is your brain's primal threat detection center, nice and calm. But when you are sleep deprived, that connection is practically severed. The prefrontal cortex loses its grip, and the amygdala becomes hyperactive and totally disinhibited. You literally lose your cognitive control, and emotional instability takes the wheel. This is exactly why a minor inconvenience after a terrible night of sleep feels like a full-blown end-of-the-world catastrophe. And this breakdown right here brilliantly illustrates just how systemic this problem is. Beyond just the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, look at the locus coeruleus. This little structure is basically your brainstem's fire alarm. During healthy sleep, it's supposed to quiet right down. But with chronic anxiety, it continuously floods your system with noradrenaline. That causes severe sleep fragmentation and completely suppresses the deep, restorative, slow-wave sleep you need for healthy aging and cellular repair. Furthermore, this chronic sleep loss hyperactivates the HPA axis, your body's primary stress response system. That dumps cortisol into your bloodstream and drives systemic, low-grade inflammation. So you can see how deeply interconnected your brain health, your daily stress regulation, and even your long-term physical aging truly are. It's all connected. Which brings us to the flip-flop switch model. This is basically how your body maintains sleep-wake homeostasis. I want you to think of it as a literal electrical switch in your brain that flips you back and forth between sleep and arousal. On one side, you have the VLPO, which is your dedicated sleep-promoting center. On the other side, you have your monoaminergic arousal systems. In a perfectly healthy brain, it's a clean switch. You are either completely awake or completely asleep. But here's the catch. The physiological hyperarousal caused by persistent anxiety basically jams this biological switch. So you end up caught in this frustrating, exhausting purgatory where you are way too tired to be fully awake, but your arousal systems are firing way too hard to let you fall asleep. So let's look at how we fix this. Moving into retraining the brain and the clinical protocols for insomnia. If you've been struggling with chronic sleep issues for a while, you might just assume that a prescription medication is the only real way out. But take a look at this incredibly powerful quote from the American College of Physicians. They officially recommend cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, as the absolute first-line treatment for adults. And the science backs this up beautifully. In rigorous clinical trials, CBTI routinely matches and often completely outperforms standard sleep medication in the long run. And the best part, it does so without any of the risks of chemical dependency, daytime grogginess, or weird long-term side effects. For chronic insomnia, CBTI is the undisputed gold standard in modern sleep medicine. Now let's be clear, CBTI isn't just about sipping some chamomile tea and taking a warm bath. It is a highly structured, scientifically rigorous program, typically done over 6 to 10 sessions. It's designed to literally rewire your brain's neuroplastic relationship with your bed. It operates on these core pillars. First, educating you on the actual biology of sleep. Then, systematically restricting your time in bed to build up sleep drive. Using stimulus control to break toxic mental habits. Restructuring those catastrophic 2 a.m. thoughts. And finally, utilizing targeted relaxation and hygiene practices. It systematically tackles both the cognitive worry and the physiological hyperarousal at the exact same time. So, the crucial point is understanding how these specific techniques actually work under the hood, starting with sleep restriction therapy. Now I know, restricting sleep to get more sleep sounds completely backward, but here is the biological reality. If you spend 8 hours in bed every night, but you're only actually sleeping for 5 of them, you are actively training your brain to associate your mattress with 3 hours of tossing, turning, and stressing out. SRT temporarily limits your time in bed to tightly match your actual sleep time. And yes, actually, you might feel a little bit more tired for the first few days, but this intentionally builds up a massive biological sleep pressure. It essentially forces your brain to consolidate that fragmented, awful rest into a single, deep, uninterrupted block of sleep. It's a real game changer. Next up is the absolute cornerstone of stimulus control. We call it the 20-minute rule. Here's how it works. If you have been lying awake for 20 minutes and you're feeling frustrated, you absolutely must get out of bed. Get up, go to a dimly lit room, and do something incredibly boring and relaxing until your eyelids get heavy again. Why? It all comes down to behavioral conditioning. If you stay in bed battling your own anxiety, your brain subconsciously links your physical mattress with the emotion of stress. Your bed essentially becomes a trigger for hyperarousal. The 20-minute rule breaks that toxic association. It retrains your brain to view the bed as a place exclusively for the deep work of the unconscious mind, pure, restorative sleep. Okay, so mastering your sleep also means mastering the interplay between two distinct systems, Process C and Process S. Process C is your circadian rhythm. That's your body's internal 24-hour clock, and it's primarily driven by your daily light exposure. Process S, on the other hand, is sleep homeostasis. From the very moment you wake up in the morning, a neurochemical called adenosine starts accumulating in your brain. This is a chemical pressure that literally builds up all day long until you finally sleep and clear it all out. CBTI works so well because it perfectly aligns these two processes. You anchor Process C with rock-solid, consistent wake times and morning sunlight, and you maximize Process S by not taking daytime naps and using that sleep restriction we just talked about. Now, let's strip away all the online wellness fluff for a second and focus strictly on clinically validated sleep hygiene. Consistency is king here. You literally must wake up at the exact same time every single day, yes, even on the weekends, to anchor that circadian rhythm. Your room needs to be cool, optimally between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, because your core body temperature has to drop to initiate deep sleep. No screens for an hour before bed. That artificial blue light suppresses your natural melatonin production. Cut your caffeine off by 2 p.m. And finally, you really have to limit evening alcohol. A lot of people think a nightcap helps, and sure, alcohol might help you pass out, but it severely suppresses your REM sleep and completely fragments the second half of your night, wrecking your recovery. All right, let's transition into the tactical toolkit and look at exactly how we break that dreaded 2 a.m. cycle tonight. To actually defeat the racing mind in the moment, we have to understand what cognitive scientist Dr. Luc Baudouin calls mental perturbance. Evolutionarily speaking, your brain has a built-in sleep onset control system that constantly monitors whether it's safe to go offline.
If your mind is engaged in active planning, problem solving, or emotional worry, even if you're just stressing over a completely mundane work email, your brain interprets that mental activity as a literal signal of danger. It thinks, wait, we are problem solving right now, therefore there is a threat, therefore it is definitely not safe to sleep. Your own modern everyday worry effectively tricks your ancient biological survival systems into keeping you awake.
So how do you hack that system? With a brilliantly simple technique called cognitive shuffling, or the serial diverse imagining task. Think about it. When you're naturally falling asleep, your thoughts become super random, kind of dreamy and nonsensical. Science calls this hypnagogic mentation. Cognitive shuffling intentionally mimics this exact process to trick your brain into sleeping. Here's how you do it. Pick a totally neutral seed word, like bedtime. Take the first letter, B. Now imagine a series of random objects starting with that letter: a ball, a bear, a bicycle, a banana. Once you run out of B words, just casually move to E: eagle, earring, elephant. This gives your working memory a low-stakes, non-threatening task. It completely breaks the cycle of anxious rumination, and it signals to your brain's threat detection center that the environment is finally safe. Now, while cognitive shuffling is amazing for targeting the racing mind, the 4-7-8 breathing method specifically targets your physiological hyperarousal. This is an ancient pranayama technique, but it is deeply grounded in modern human physiology. You just inhale quietly through your nose for 4 seconds, hold that breath for 7 seconds, and then exhale forcefully through your mouth with a whoosh sound for 8 full seconds. By making your exhale significantly longer than your inhale, you are biologically forcing a massive shift in your autonomic nervous system. You are literally stepping off the sympathetic fight or flight gas pedal and firmly stepping on the parasympathetic rest and digest brakes. It actively lowers your heart rate, reduces your blood pressure, and just melts away that physical muscle tension. Bringing this all together, the most important takeaway is this: the loop can absolutely be broken. We so often think of sleep as something that just passively happens to us, right? Like it's just a switch that flips if we're lucky enough that night. But the deepest insight from modern neuroscience is that sleep is actually a highly trainable cognitive skill. By understanding your neurobiology, by respecting the bidirectionality of your anxiety and your sleep quality, utilizing those core CBTI principles, and deploying tactical tools like cognitive shuffling, you can literally reprogram your brain's architecture over time. You can fundamentally shift yourself away from a state of chronic hyperarousal and move toward lifelong vitality, cognitive preservation, and truly deep restorative rest. And that brings us to the end of our exploration today. You now possess an elite, evidence-based framework to finally conquer that midnight racing mind. So, I want to leave you with this final, empowering question to consider as you prepare for bed tonight. What is the one persistent, unhelpful thought that you are going to intentionally shuffle away tonight to reclaim your rest? Try the 20-minute rule, give cognitive shuffling a shot, and take back your sleep. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And hey, here is to a genuinely restful night.